Good morning. On behalf of Director Tom Bishatsky, welcome to the Arizona Department of Water Resources. I am Clint Chandler, the Assistant Director for ADWR. The Director this morning is returning from Washington, D.C. after having testified yesterday before the Senate ENR Subcommittee on Water and Power. Tom expressed support for 5 Arizona priorities contained in the Western Drought legislation that Senator Flake introduced last week, S. 2902. Those items include system conservation provisions purposed to increase and protect levels in reservoirs, including Lake Mead. Requires a study through the National Academy of Sciences concerning tamarisk control, that's salt cedar, and measures to promote better forest health. Our forest and other wildland areas are among our most critical watersheds. These concepts were identified through close consultation with numerous Arizona stakeholders, including this agency. Senator Flake was joined by 5 co-sponsors, all of whom are Western U.S. Senators, including Senator McCain. We commend and thank our 2 U.S. Senators, Senators Flake and McCain, for their leadership in carrying this legislation. Turning to this meeting, this is the 2nd Colorado River Shortage Preparedness Workshop in consecutive years. We will continue these briefings as long as necessary. Until this drought relents, the people of Arizona expect us to proactively respond to the challenges, and we won't let them down. We have answered in various forms, including the Director's efforts this week on Capitol Hill, and some of the measures we will discuss today. Very significantly, we will continue conversations with Arizonans regarding drought difficulties and other matters of great collective significance. Your input is welcome and valued. We further appreciate the strong interest in this matter from members of the congressional delegation and elected officials from throughout the state. Major choices in coming months can only occur with the support of the water community and state, local, and tribal policymakers. Guided by the strong commitment Governor Ducey has provided regarding sound water management, this agency has a bias toward responsible action. Our posture toward the current impediments is consonant with the Arizona water management heritage, and we aspire to surmount challenges with the resourcefulness demonstrated by our predecessors. We view the future at once optimistically and realistically. I've also been asked to discuss logistics just for a bit. In an effort to provide an opportunity for stakeholders to participate in this event, we are broadcasting this workshop via webcast. There are 3 satellite locations hosting the webcast: the CAP headquarters in Phoenix, the CAP Tucson office, and the Bureau of Reclamation's Yuma office. We have several presenters who will cover different aspects of this briefing, and we have dedicated some time on the agenda where you will have the opportunity to ask questions and make comments. If you were to have a question, we ask you to complete a blue speaking card if you would like to ask that question or make a comment during the Q&A portion of the program. Speakers' cards are available at the sign-in table, and our staff members are here in the room and also have a few blue cards to distribute. Please note that in the event that we are not able to address all questions and comments within the time allotted, staff will address your questions following the workshop through email. So it is important that you include your contact information so we could follow up. Folks that are participating through one of our satellite locations, please submit your queries and comments to the facilitator. I believe we have a good program for today. We are pleased to have partnered with the Central Arizona Project in providing this workshop. Lisa Atkins, the president of the CAP board, will speak next, and Ted Cooke, the CAP general manager, will present concerning Arizona plans in action. We appreciate the participation of the United States Bureau of Reclamation. Dan Bunk will provide an overview of the Colorado River System, and Pam Adams will elaborate concerning tribal consultation efforts. With all of that, I turn the podium over to Lisa.
Good morning. Thank you, Clint, very much for opening the program. I have just a few comments that I want to make, but first of all, our partner deserves a lot of appreciation. The Department of Water Resources has done a lot of work with CAP to get this meeting together today, and we appreciate the fact that this year again, DWR has agreed to host the meeting. And we, again, appreciate all of their hospitality. I also want to take a second and introduce the elected officials that have taken time out of their busy day to join us. Our county supervisors are well represented in both Mojave and Pinal County. Mojave County Supervisors Mark Clark and Steve Moss are with us, and Pinal County Supervisor Dick Powell is with us. We're also delighted to have a member of the legislature, State Representative Lisa Otondo is with us. And as well, we are delighted to have four members of the Colorado River Indian Tribes, Chairman Dennis Patch, Vice Chairman Keith Moses, Councilman Amelia Flores, and Grantham Stevens. And thank you again for taking time out of your day. It seems hardly possible that it was a year ago that Tom Bishotsky and I were standing here talking to you about this proud tradition of Arizona making very tough but foresighted choices to manage the most valuable resource we have in the state, and that is water. I asked you at that time to help us continue the conversation to protect Lake Mead. You responded overwhelmingly, and on behalf of the CAP board and CAP and DWR, we thank you for that response. We committed to keeping you up to date, as Clint told you, with detailed information about the condition of the Colorado River system. We have done that, and today is yet another part of that evolving conversation. Keeping this conversation going and making information available through events like this and other media is in part responsible for the successful outcomes that prevented shortage in 2016 and is likely to prevent shortage in 2017. You're going to hear more about this in a few minutes and in the days and weeks to come, but most of all, you deserve to take a bow for your critical role in protecting Lake Mead, and for that I thank you. So give yourselves a round of applause. I just wanted to see if you were paying attention to the speaker. Last April, during our shortage workshop, much of the discussion was concentrated on whether or not shortage would be declared in 2016. And all eyes were on the Bureau of Reclamation's August 24-month study. That's the study that the Bureau uses each year to make a shortage determination, and as you know all too well, we avoided shortage in 2016 due to our collective efforts to conserve water in Lake Mead and a fortuitous boost from Mother Nature that we fondly refer to as Miracle May. Today, while we gather to reflect on the success we collectively created in 2016, the drought continues. The serious situation on the Colorado River still persists, and more work is required by all Colorado River users. Today, we will again cover the near-term outlook, but we will also be looking at what needs to happen going forward to protect Lake Mead, our continuing campaign. The work ahead will not be easy. Even if and when the drought eases, we will have more than half empty reservoirs throughout the system. We will also still have an over-allocated river to address. That's what we fondly refer to as the structural deficit. Continued success will be possible only with ongoing collaborative efforts. These will be in addition to the significant investments and actions you are taking as part of the everyday stewardship of your water supplies. Your efforts, the efforts of all Arizonans, have always set the standard in wise water management and conservation. It is our hope that the things we have learned, using the tools that we have developed together across our impressive history in water management, and the things we have been doing the last 3 years in particular, will help us take the next steps needed for longer-term sustainability, that Arizona will continue to lead the way and bring others along. With your continued engagement, we will be able to continue to provide accurate and timely information so all of us, from elected leaders to stakeholders, and in particular the general public, can maintain our fortitude and determination to do what is necessary to protect Lake Mead. With that, I will turn it back to Clint, and we'll get started. Thank you all very much for taking time out of your schedule, and for those who are joining us online. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. I will now provide an overview before we proceed with the rest of the program. Arizona has a long, rich heritage of proactive and successful water management. Indeed, residents of the area now encompassing the state of Arizona have successfully responded to water challenges since before statehood. We benefit from the leadership legacies of Carl Hayden, the founders of the Salt River Project, Bruce Babbitt, Stan Turley, John Kyle, among many others. Among the landmark contributions are the establishment of the Salt River Project approximately a decade before statehood, the establishment of the Yuma Irrigation Districts, the Colorado River Compact of 1922, which established important distribution and division contours. That was signed at Bishop's Lodge near Santa Fe and helped set the stage for the construction of Hoover Dam and many of the other big activities, the projects that followed. The establishment of the Central Arizona Project through federal legislation in 1968. The enactment of the 1980 Groundwater Act, which established this agency, among many other things. The Assured and Adequate Water Supply Program, which is an aspect of the 1980 Groundwater Act. We have a couple of conspicuous anniversaries. The Underground Storage and Recovery Program and the Arizona Water Banking Authority were established in 1986 and 1996, respectively. We have almost 9 million acre-feet of water stored underground for future use. We have the mandatory water conservation requirements. Those are within the bounds of the 5 AMAs, active management areas. Less than 10% water loss are unaccounted for, and we have developed or utilized best management practices. And we have the drought preparedness requirements that we'll talk about later in the program. Last year, I sat out there representing Senator Flake, and this is one of the most memorable slides from that presentation. As you can see, Arizona has a remarkable record of accomplishment on water management issues. So this is a result of some of the proactive efforts that we'll discuss, and I had previously referenced in the last slide, and we'll discuss elsewhere in this program and other activity. Arizona is using approximately the same water volume as had been the experience in 1957, 7.1 million acre-feet then, 7 million acre-feet now. But we have had almost a 500% increase in population, and our economy grew by approximately 1,652%. That is extraordinary. This is Arizona's water supply budget. As you can see, the Colorado River constitutes 40% of our water supply, the 7 million acre-feet consumed by the state, of which 1.6 million, or 23%, flows through the CAP canals. You can also see that approximately 57% of the state's water budget comes through surface water, which is a more renewable resource than groundwater. This chart is somewhat self-explanatory. So this is the distribution of the state's river usage. Almost a quarter, 24%, goes to CAP, M&I, municipal and industrial. Another 26.5 for on-river agriculture. That includes the Yuma agriculture industry. Approximately 12.2% to CAP Ag, and 32.6 for tribal. These are some of the essential issues that we are considering. A Colorado River shortage declaration is increasingly likely over the next 5 years. The U.S. Bureau of Reclamation predicts that shortage on the river is not likely to occur before 2018. There is a 10% probability presently of shortage in 2017. Some Arizona water users will be impacted by a shortage declaration. Cities, Yuma agriculture, and other on-river Colorado River users with priority 4 entitlements or better will not see a reduction in deliveries during a Tier 1 shortage. And we'll elaborate further regarding some of these items elsewhere in the program. This is a big emphasis for us. Arizona will continue to be proactive to avoid a crisis. The choices that we made decades ago have prepared us for potential shortages on the Colorado River. That should sound familiar. Over the last 2 decades, the Arizona Water Banking Authority has stored 3.4 million acre-feet, more than 2 years' worth of Colorado River deliveries to central Arizona in order to provide backup supplies in times of shortage over the long term. AEWR, CAP, and other Arizona water managers are closely monitoring the Colorado River and taking proactive steps to address the risk of river shortages and improve the health of the river system. Some topics of discussion. We'll provide an update on the hydrology of the Colorado River system, presentation concerning Arizona plans and actions, reservoir protection. We'll be back up to discuss the Colorado River Drought Contingency Plan, and then we'll have a discussion concerning next steps. And that closes that presentation. Next on the agenda is Dan Bunk. Dan is the River Operations Group Manager for Reclamation's Boulder Canyon Operations Office for the Lower Colorado region. Dan will provide a very high-level overview on the management of the Colorado River reservoirs and an update on the current state of the system. With that, I will turn over the podium to Dan.
All right, thank you, Clint, and good morning, everyone. I appreciate the opportunity from AEWR and CAP to present today, and I'll be giving a very brief overview of the state of the Colorado River system, as well as projections over the next couple of years. All right, so I know many of you are familiar with sort of the breakdown of the Colorado River system, but I just wanted to just sort of open by giving you a brief overview. One of the key things of the Colorado River system is the amount of storage in the system. There's approximately 60 million acre-feet of storage in the Colorado system between the upper basin and the lower basin. About 50 million acre-feet of that storage is from Lake Powell and Lake Mead alone, and 26 million acre-feet, which is a good chunk of that just in Lake Mead. So it's really the storage in the system that helps us to operate on such a tight margin from year to year. You know, you've heard that the system is over-allocated at a minimum. The budget is very tight, so we really rely on that storage to get through periods of drought like we've experienced since 2000 in the basin. Another key thing to understand about the system is that about 90% of the inflow is derived from the upper basin, and so we really rely on the snowpack and the snowpack runoff into Lake Powell for water supply. And then you need basically a significant amount of or enough runoff into Lake Powell in order to trigger higher releases out of Lake Powell that we call equalization. So even though you might hear about things like a Miracle May, like we had last year, which helped us at least not to go any lower than we ended up the elevation going last year, because Lake Mead's elevation did decline again last year. At least the inflow is enough where Powell's operations didn't trigger to a lower release than what we were projecting. And, similarly, we have a similar situation this year, which I'll describe in a few slides from now. And then lastly, the delivery is operated by the law of the river, and so, we follow those very closely at Reclamation, and you'll hear certain operating agreements like the 2007 interim guidelines, which I'll describe in a little bit. So the current drought, it started in 2000. It's a 16-year drought. The white line, the red line on this chart with the red squares represents the individual water year or calendar year inflows that have occurred since 1999. If you look at the white line on the chart, this is the long-term historical average for the upper basin, which is about 14.8 million acre-feet. There's only been 3 years during the drought that have been above that, and really only 1 year that was significant enough for Powell to release a lot of extra water. It released about 12.5 million acre-feet in 2011, as opposed to anywhere between about 8.23 and 9 million acre-feet in all the other years. And so that was really the only year that had one of those really big inflow years that we need to replenish the system. If you compare this current period of drought, it's this sort of orange line here. It's about 2.4 million acre-feet below the average, and it compares to the driest 16-year period in the paleohydrology, which is a 1,200-year record dating back to the 700s, as well as comparing to about the 25th percentile of climate-projected hydrology. So the current drought, the driest 16-year period on record, is a significant drought. Since the drought started in 2000, Lake Mead's capacity has declined from about 95% full. Currently, we're at about 37% of capacity, right around elevation 1075. And you can see the impact of the 2011 hydrology right here, where Mead gained nearly 50 feet that year. And then we had a lower basin hydrology event in 2005, where Mead's elevation gained about 25 feet. But other than that, we've seen the impacts of that tight balance or that imbalance from year to year, as Lake Mead's elevation has declined nearly 140 feet since the start of the drought in 2000. So the first 5 years of the drought sparked a new discussion amongst the stakeholders, and it turned into the development of the 2007 interim guidelines. Some of the key points of the guidelines are the coordinated operations of Powell and Mead, which attempt to balance the contents of the two reservoirs better than previous operations had allowed. It also allowed water users to forbear use and create what's called intentionally created surplus, maybe one of our first conservation measures, and then there's been additional ones since then that we'll talk about later, as well as establishment of the shortage criteria for the lower basin. Not included in this are provisions for Mexico. So in 2012, Minute 319 was adopted through 2017, which has similar provisions such as shortage and surplus sharing with the U.S., as well as a mechanism to conserve water. Between these programs, there's approximately 6 feet of additional water in Lake Mead that's been created binationally that's helped to prop up the elevation and, basically slow the decline, and we've been able to still continue to operate in a normal condition without a shortage in the lower Colorado Basin. So now let's just talk a little bit about current conditions. On this graph here, we've got snowpack and snow water equivalent on the y-axis, and then we've got the water year, which started on October 1st on the y-axis. On the x-axis, this black line here, this represents what a normal snowpack looks like based on the 1981 through 2010 period. This green line is what we did last year. So last year we had very low inflow projections until we had the miracle May, and then we ended up with about 94% of average of inflow by the time the year was over. This year, snowpack peaked at about 94% of median on April 3rd. Started to melt off quickly, but there's been a series of storms in the upper basin since about mid-April, and so we've actually seen the forecast increase by about 10% since April 1st. So it's gone up from about 74% to 84% of average for the April through July period, and then 85% of average for the water year. So still below average. This would still make it the 14th year of below average inflow, but at least not as bad as, or not as far below average as what we were seeing previously. Ahead of myself. So what does this mean for Lake Mead? Well, what this means, Lake Powell is still currently projected to release 9.0 million acre feet, so we'll get a little bit of extra water this year over the normal 8.23 million acre feet. And so Lake Mead's projected to decline about 4 feet or so this year, not as much as a typical year where it declines as much as 12 to 14 feet with an 8.23 release out of Powell. And so the vast majority of our projections are still showing Lake Mead to end the calendar year, which is the elevation that we look at for determining shortage, right above 1075. So as mentioned previously, still a strong likelihood of not being in shortage and being in normal condition again in 2017. But if you look out towards the end of 2017 and what it means for 2018, a higher chance and a lot less certainty going into 2018. And just to remind everybody that even with this dip this summer below elevation 1075, when we ran the August 24-month study last year and projected for to January 1, it indicated a normal condition in 2016. So we'll remain in a normal condition throughout the remainder of 2016, and we'll just temporarily, hopefully, drop below 1075 and then slowly recover to about elevation 1078 by the end of the calendar year. And I've got one more slide. I know I'm a little bit over time, and I apologize. And so about at least twice a year, and we did an extra run in April, Reclamation will go ahead and project what the probability of certain system conditions are. In this case, we'll just focus on Lake Mead and what the projections are looking like for 2017 through 2021. This first line on the table is the chance of a shortage condition of any amount. And so here's the 10% chance that Clint mentioned previously. But you can see when we get to 2018 and beyond, the chances of a shortage are a little bit higher, quite a bit higher, I should say, about 55, 56% in 2018, so a little bit more than a 50% chance, and about 60 to 65% chance 2019 through 2021. And then there's also chances of hitting some of these deeper levels of shortages, as early as 2018, but in particular looking out to 2020 and 2021. So I'm personally rooting for this surplus condition of any amount, or maybe even flood control. So that's what I'm rooting for. So, okay. Thank you.
All guests have been muted.
Arizona Project. Ted will provide an overview of Arizona's proactive efforts to prepare for the possibility of a shortage. With that, I will turn it over to Ted.
Good morning. Thanks, everyone, for coming, and to those who are participating remotely. As you heard from the earlier presenters this morning, Arizona has a proud tradition and a storied reputation among the other states and water users in the Southwest of our proactive and innovative water management programs. You heard both Clint and Dan refer to the 2007 guidelines and what was involved there, and that was I don't know that it was mentioned that those guidelines was an agreement among the 7 Colorado Basin states and the Bureau of Reclamation about what to do to help mitigate and prevent shortage. And so we are prepared, as we must be, as the junior priority holder on the Colorado River for shortage if and when it happens. And as we get closer and closer to that, the more grateful that we are prepared. But as Lisa mentioned, there still is more work to do, both to capitalize on what we've done already and additional steps to continue to do what we've always done. So there's 3 examples on my first slide here of those things that we've been put in place. Arizona Water Banking Authority firming, I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And then there's a statewide drought plan that has been put in place. And then also many of the local water providers have also adopted drought response mechanisms as part of their plans. More recently, in the last 2 or 3 years, we have had a couple of very intense programs that I will describe in a little bit more detail, including the Lower Basin Drought Response Actions Memorandum of Understanding, or the LBMOU for short. And then another one, a little difference between these that I will explain, Pilot System Conservation Program as well, both intended to identify quantities of water that otherwise would have been taken out of Lake Mead for normal uses and leave it in the lake to help stave off and slow down the rate of decline in the lake. As you've heard before, over the last couple of decades, Arizona Water Banking Authority has accrued approximately 3.4 million acre-feet of credits for in-state use in times of shortage. So just for a moment, what is a credit for those folks who don't know? And what that is to use wet water. And there's a little sheet that was handed out at the table. Hopefully everybody picked a copy of that up. Some of the terms that we're using appear on that glossary. So what a credit is to use wet water and store it underground, either in a prepared location to do that, underground storage facility, or in some cases for irrigation, where wet surface water is used to irrigate crops instead of using groundwater, and that creates a credit. And this whole accrual and use of credits thing is one of these innovative programs that Arizona invented, for which we're so well known. Another 600,000 acre-feet has been stored on behalf of Nevada by Arizona, and then once again, a lot of the local entities have stored water on their own behalf for shortage preparedness. The Arizona Water Banking Authority has, among its many responsibilities, a firming obligation in 3 areas. And firming is one of the terms that shows up on the little glossary that was passed out earlier, and I'll just read it because it's a good definition. Firming means finding an alternative water supply to replace a portion of a reduced water supply during a shortage. So if someone has a water supply that is at risk for being short at some point in time, it can be firmed, maybe not fully firmed, but partially firmed by having an alternative supply that's available to replace the shorted supply. So the Water Banking Authority, and happy birthday, by the way, 20 years, provides shortage protection for the on-river and municipal industrial users of Colorado River water. And you see the P4, that was mentioned earlier, priority 4 on the Colorado River. Arizona's water is prioritized 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the lower number is higher priority. So P4 is relevant because almost all of CAP's water is P4, and some of the water on the river is P4, and that is the priority level at which firming begins to take place, because that is the priority of water that is at risk under the shortage scenarios. Second thing is that the state is also responsible for assisting the Department of the Interior in firming Indian settlement water supplies under the Arizona Water Settlements Act and the various tribal water settlements. And then third, last but not least, is also firming for CAP, municipal and industrial priority water supplies during shortage as well, those 3. So what triggers a firming event. When reductions in the Colorado River supplies impact on-river and in-state CAP water uses at the P4 priority level, then that is when the Water Banking Authority firming obligation kicks in. And there are those three right there again: on-river, tribal, and CAP M&I. Based on the current demand, and you heard before, current demand of those three uses, it is unlikely that a Tier 1 shortage would require the water bank to begin to firm by recovering and using credits. And I know we're peeling the onion here, so we'll have a slide in a minute that describes what a Tier 1 shortage is, but that also, when we say it won't happen under a Tier 1, I guess that indicates that maybe there are other tiers, lower tiers, that might impact this. And there's, again, that same slide will help to illustrate that. As demand increases over time, so this is now, as these levels of demands increase over time, it is likely that this situation could change. That at Tier 1 or Tier 2 or Tier 3, as time goes on, and those demands in those use categories increase, then that might begin to impinge on some of those earlier or higher level tiers in the lake. And I'll use that same slide to show that too. CAP is the water bank's partner in recovery. So somebody said recently, and I thought it was a very apropos statement, it's not a bank unless you can withdraw. So for all these years we've been depositing, and that has been primarily the water bank's role to do that, and now that time is drawing near to perhaps withdraw that, CAP is the key partner with the water bank to do that. We'll need a lot of other help, and I'll get to that too. And so there's an example. We showed the same slide last year of the partnership between ADWR, CAP, the Water Banking Authority, and very, very important down there at the bottom, I hope everybody can see it, the stakeholders need to be involved. And there is a recovery plan. We're not done with it. We need to do more work on that so that we can reap the benefits of all the work that we've done on the deposit side when the withdrawal side comes. So preparing for shortage recovery of water banking credits. Again, just focusing for a moment on the two primary partners. Central Arizona Project is developing with Reclamation something we're calling the CAP System Use Agreement. That was unveiled earlier this year. We hope to have it finalized for implementation here shortly, hopefully this year, to do that. And for all these years we've been using the CAP to do one thing, is to take Colorado River entitlement, put it in the canal, and deliver it. Once we start recovering credits and doing other things like that and putting that in the canal too, we need some rules to govern how all that works. That's what this agreement is. And we're very close to having that put in place. It's rules. It's like traffic lights or speed limits, things like that to govern multiple uses of this infrastructure that we have. We also are doing a number of activities to further the recovery planning efforts. One notable thing that will start very soon is exploratory drilling at Tonopah Desert Recharge Project. It's a large underground storage facility out west, and we would like to determine the feasibility of doing recovery at the same place where we did the storage. So we'll be drilling some holes and seeing the feasibility of that. Also, exploring recovery opportunities with partners in each active management area. CAP has a delivery system, a canal. We do not have recovery infrastructure, but other people do. So use of what we have, enhancing what we have, maybe adding some more, will be done through partnerships with other parties. And the objective, as it says in the last bullet, is to ensure, like, once again, that when we need, that we're ready when the time comes for us to capitalize on all this storage that we've done in the past. The Water Banking Authority itself is busy as well on this, developing, for instance, firming arrangements with the Gila River Indian community. And under the IGA Intergovernmental Agreement with CAP, recently the statutory authority of the Water Bank was expanded not just to create credits by buying and storing water on its own, but to acquire credits from other folks who have done that. And that's done through the use of the CAP 4-cent water storage tax. Another innovation that has come through Arizona's, it's what we do, water planning over the last couple of years. Once again, I can't emphasize this enough, that meeting the firming, Arizona Water Banking Authority's responsibility, my time is up, to meet its firming obligations, but it will take everyone's help and cooperation to make that happen. And I'm only about halfway done, actually. So real quickly, and I have two topics. So is that my first topic that I'm out of time, or my second topic? Okay, all right, okay, all right. So real quick on the 2007 shortage sharing guidelines, this was mentioned a couple of times before, but we put a table up here to remind everybody, or maybe for some folks the first time, what that means. There are these three defined levels in Lake Mead, 1075 feet of elevation, 1050, and 1025, and each one of those has some defined, mandatory, agreed to delivery reductions that will be taken by Arizona, Nevada, and as was mentioned earlier, Mexico, under Minute 319 to the treaty with the Republic of Mexico, will also take some agreed-to shortages at those elevations. So if the lake gets down to that level, or more precisely, as Dr. Bunk described, if the lake is projected to be at these levels at the end of the current year, then we have agreed that in the following year we will take these reductions in delivery. You don't see California on that list, even though California was a party to this agreement, because they have the senior right among the lower basin states. It's an important thing to remember that will put things in context when we hear more of what will be presented later. Arizona takes the largest reduction quantities here, a lot at the first tier, 320,000 acre feet, and then additional 80,000 foot increments. Nevada, which has a relatively small, compared to Arizona, river apportionment, shares in that, and then there's Mexico's numbers as well. This is the slide that I was referring to earlier. See if my mouse works. So it's an example for 2017. Here, I don't think it has that number on there, but if we were to have a Tier 1 shortage in the next year or so, this 320,000 acre-foot reduction from our normal delivery level of about 1.5 million or a little bit more would eliminate our excess water pool, which goes mostly to the water bank in the Central Arizona Groundwater Replenishment District. That would be eliminated. And then at current usage levels, about a half of the non-Indian agricultural pool would be eliminated in a Tier 1 shortage. A Tier 2 shortage, just for reference, would be right about here, which would, at a Tier 2 shortage, virtually eliminate the agricultural pool, and then a Tier 3 shortage would be right about here. So it would begin to impact the non-Indian ag priority. One comment I need to make here is that we've got some nomenclature confusion, that these names on here are priorities, non-Indian ag priority, Indian priority, and M&I priority, but the users that fall in those categories, Indians and M&I, have some of all of this. So it's a little bit confusing. An earlier point was made. This is a situation now. As time goes on, the uses in these lower categories will push up and therefore expose these lower priority uses to higher tiers of shortage over time. Those numbers will all rise. So here's a summary and a list of some things that we are doing and have done. We've heard about this already on storage and recovery. I will want to go into this one and this one in a minute. This is the MOU that I mentioned earlier, and the pilot system conservation. Under the MOU, started in 2014, it's an agreement among parties in the three lower basin states to conserve 740,000 acre feet in Lake Mead by the end of 2017. If we do that, that's probably 8 or 9 feet in that range, and put that in context with what was heard earlier, 8 or 9 feet when we're maybe 2 or 3 or 4 feet away from a shortage tier. This makes a difference, and I'll describe the status of that in just a second. A little bit more modest program, pilot system conservation program, targeted to conserve about 75,000 acre feet, but this is a solicitation program to get local parties to come up with their own conservation, rather than the big water providers doing something, having independent parties come and say, we can do something on our own and conserve some water in Lake Mead as well. And then last but not least, these are a little bit longer-term things, but some augmentation work has been done, including weather modification and discussions on desalination, both ocean desal and local brackish groundwater desal. Those conversations are starting now because, as I think we're all beginning to understand, whatever we do, there's always a next thing that we have to do, and we can't wait until the next thing is needed. We have to start right away. Once we get today's thing finished, we need to start on tomorrow's thing. And that's, again, part of this thing we do in Arizona. So let's talk a little bit about the MOU and the pilot system conservation. This is a biggie, a busy slide. Again, 740,000 acre-feet by the end of 2017. That's the goal for the Memorandum of Understanding. As you might expect, Arizona's piece is the biggest piece. We're going to do nearly half of that. MWD in California also has a big share. The Bureau has some, and one important thing to remember about the Bureau, they don't have water. So the Bureau's contribution mostly comes from, or entirely comes from, efficiencies in the operation of the system. And then Southern Nevada Water Authority is sharing in that as well. On the pilot system conservation program, there was a round of funding, in this case, including the same parties, lower basin parties, the Bureau, but importantly, an upper basin partner on this one. Denver Water participated. We have just now started the second phase of pilot system conservation with some more federal funding and some additional funding from some of the lower basin local parties as well. And I'll have the status here in a page or two. This is an expanded version of part of one of the slides that you saw earlier, this steady decline in the level of Lake Mead. Since the drought began in 2000, the lake was nearly full. As Dan mentioned, we have received over this period of time, except for 1 year, which was, I believe, right here, 2014, we've received a normal release from Lake Powell every year. So the drought is not directly impacting what is happening in Lake Mead because we receive a normal release from Lake Powell. What is not happening is the drought has drawn Lake Powell down, so we get fewer of these equalizing releases from Lake Powell. Rather than one every maybe 3-4 years, we got one in this whole 16-year stretch. We got one of these, and it's not enough to keep replenishing Lake Mead. Unfortunately, and you've heard the term before, Lake Mead, even without a drought, we have a structural deficit. It's over-allocated. More goes out, more is committed to go out than comes in. So we have to find a way to balance those two things by voluntary reductions, if necessary. And those are the things we've done. I won't go through all these boxes up here, but this is the list. Over that entire period of time, we've been doing a lot in Arizona and with the other basin states. Programs that we've put in place, policy-level agreements, individual programs such as the MOU is on here in the pilot system conservation studies, et cetera. It has not stopped us. It's slowed it down a lot. But here we are now where the blue line runs out and the green line starts. More is needed to be done because we're right on top of this happening. And once we get into here, the reservoir narrows and things go down faster. Of our 345,000 acre-foot share of the MOU quantity, we will finish that in Arizona a year early. Yay for us, right? That's the type of thing that we always do. So we have another year, even before the deadline, to do even more, and we will. I'll get to how many feet in the lake this is in a second. Our partners, the Bureau and Southern Nevada Water Authority, have conserved another 44,000 acre-feet of their targets by the end of this year. That's the expectation. The pilot system conservation programs have conserved another 50,000 acre-feet, expected to by the end of this year. And all of these together will put more than 5 feet in Lake Mead. So when we're talking about the 3 feet or so that we missed the first shortage tier at the end of 2015 to avoid shortage in this year, why did that happen? This. When we talk about may we miss the first shortage tier by 3 feet in the median case or 1 foot in the least probable case at the end of this year and avoid shortage in 2017, why did that happen? If we do more of this, can we eliminate maybe that last foot in the median case projection for, even though there's a 10% chance, the median case for 2018 is only 1 foot away from that first shortage here. We can do this again. But you see the margin is narrowing, and I'll say it for maybe the 4th time. We need to find a way to do more. Mexico not to be left behind, has contributed about almost 3 feet of water in the lake as well. So when we're only a foot or 2 or 3, a lot of people can claim credit for that, but all of our contributions have helped to do this. So my last slide, finally. Our collective efforts with these programs that we've put in place, again, has kept us out of shortage in 2016, probably will in 2017, and we're within a very close margin of doing it again in 2018. We have to do that in 2018. It will also give us more time to do the next thing that we need to do, which is going to have to be bigger and more than what we've done in the past. But by doing these things that we've already done, it will help us learn and also maybe not fear so much that the things that we need to do are achievable. We can do it, and we can find ways to do it without impacting our economy too much, without impacting our lifestyle too much. So Clint, I'm sorry, is going to take over again and talk about what the next things we need to do are.
Thank you, Ted. That was helpful. I will now present regarding the Lower Colorado River Basin DCP, Drought Contingency Plan. This is a graph of natural flow data extending back to, at least extending back to 1906. As you can see, the median is approximately 14.6 million acre feet. There's considerable range there. There were great years, and then there were dismal years. The 25th percentile is approximately 11.2 million acre feet. The 75th percentile is approximately 17.6. There's, again, considerable range there. But the intertemporal data has limitations. It has limited utility for us. Because we are experiencing a sustained drought, we must respond prudently to the constraints. So we had to reconfigure our modeling to reflect a more representative period. So we reconfigured those models for some models, extending with data extending back to 1988, which is known as the stress test period. As you can see there, the median has been adjusted downward to approximately 12.3 million acre feet. And so you can see where, as Ted alluded, we've had some strains on the system. And we had 91% capacity at Lake Mead, close to 2,000. Can't see it on this graph, but you can see the very good years that we had during the 1980s, a great time to be alive, great music, all the rest. We also had a lot of rain and snowpack. Good years in the 1990s. The stress test does incorporate portions of the 90s, so there are good years that are included in the stress test period, but there are also some rough years, including, as you can see, 2002. So this, the most recent 16-year period has placed those strains on the system, and it is the lowest observed period of flow in the record, the observed record, and is consistent with the tree ring data. So this is the hope for the best and do nothing scenario, and it presents some disconcerting possibilities. As you can see, over here a little bit, as Dan had indicated, we have a better than even probability of reaching shortage in calendar year 2018. If you were to look further at the 10th percentile, that is obviously not insignificant. So I would say that is a not insignificant probability of a very bad outcome. And it dips below 1025, close to calendar year 2020. So that's a 1 in 10 chance that that could happen. And that elevation level, 1025, has certain significance for us. Of course, if we were to arrive there, all sorts of alarms would be going off along the way, and it would result in considerable anxiety. But it's also a level, an elevation at which the Secretary of the Interior, acting as the water master, may take unilateral action, which introduces a lot of uncertainty into the system, into the process. It also could result in somewhat substantial hydropower losses and cause some instability in the power grids. So we don't want to arrive there. So this is the drought contingency plan. Let's see if I can get this mouse to work. So it includes numbers from the 2007 interim guidelines. So this is the status quo over here for Arizona, Nevada. And as you can see, as Ted indicated, California is not required under the law of the river to take a shortage reduction. And boy, don't they know it. So as you can see, as we go down the levels, the reductions required of our neighbor to the west are 0, settle, zilch, nada, all the way down. Even if we were to go to elevation 1,000, let's hope that never happens in our lifetimes, but we see it here on the chart. That's close to dead pool. That would be very unfortunate circumstance, and at that point the CAP canals would dry up. We'd have dust and lizards there, and even at that level, California would not receive its full entitlement. Close to, of course, we think we just go down to 1025 here on this chart, but in California, at close to elevation 1,000, that would be about 4.3 million acre-feet a year. So that would not even supply California's entitlement for 1 year. So this really isn't realistic at these levels. And as I had indicated in the previous slide, at elevation 25, we do have that possibility, that prospect that the Secretary may act. So again, this is something that probably won't occur, but it is the status quo, and it does merit mention. So for Arizona, under the 2007 guidelines, at elevation 1075, we would take a 320,000 reduction. As you can see, 1050, 400,000, 1025, 480,000. The DCP modifies those numbers significantly. Basically, this is an insurance policy, and you can see the premiums for Arizona beginning at elevation 1090. And so, in addition to the reductions required through this is like an overlay to the, sorry about that. This is essentially an overlay to the 2007 interim guideline framework. So this would result in additional reductions, more water banked in mead. We placed that fluid, that water there as system water. Instead of placing it in the ground here or for other uses in Arizona, we would leave that water in Lake Mead. And what we're attempting to do, we'll see graphically demonstrated in the next slide, we're attempting to bend the curve, but you can see how we could realize that. At elevation 1045, something significant starts to happen. California will take a shortage reduction. So this is a major departure. This is precedent setting that California has agreed to take a share of the shortage. Why would they do that? Basically, of course, there are a number of entities in California. I don't speak for any of them, but of course, You have the Imperial Irrigation District, you have Coachella, Metropolitan, you have the river users in Blythe, which have the highest priority California water right, Colorado River right, I should say. And they have varying motivations, but the one thing that unites them is a loathing of uncertainty. Just as we desire to wring every bit of uncertainty out of the system, they are similarly uncomfortable with the possibility that we could reach such critical levels that the Secretary may render some sort of unilateral action. So that is among the elements, among the factors that has motivated our neighbors to agree to this unprecedented item. Nevada takes an additional reduction, so at these levels you see the shortage reductions are distributed. Reclamation has agreed to, through the system efficiencies, contribute. And so we're taking meaningful action to bend the curve at these lower elevations and to avoid a very bad result. And you can see that here graphically. So with no action, that 10th percentile plunges below 10, 25, calendar year close to 2020. And you can see that the lines have flattened, and so we're better situated. And so we don't have, again, this is an insurance policy, so we don't have as high of a probability of an undesirable outcome. You can see that further on this graph. So this is the base case. Oh, sorry about that. And I'm almost done. I'll just take my finger off this so I don't mess it up again. So the base case, status quo, the DCP is the dotted line, so it flattens things out. We'll bank that water, we'll forgo some water, we'll keep that in the system. In doing so, there will be an opportunity cost. There will be some water forgone, that water kept in Lake Mead. But we do, this is just one scenario, we can present several, but we do avoid that possibility of a dismal outcome, and we basically take our destiny into our hands. We manage the situation and minimize the unknown. And in water management, as you know, certainty is much more preferable than the unknown, and just having that impediment to planning. The next steps, we will complete demand, hydrology, and distribution scenarios. As I've said, we've adjusted our modeling, and we'll continue to model to better comprehend the implications to the NIA pool, tribal entities, the ag pool, and other excess water users. If on-river users were to participate, that, of course, would reduce the impacts elsewhere on the system. We will have a statewide discussion concerning the voluntary reductions here in Arizona, and we will attempt to form an Arizona consensus. The statute, state law requires this, and ARS 45106, to take any agreement that implicates Arizona's entitlement, any agreement vis-a-vis other states and the United States, to the Arizona legislature. So we would need to obtain their approval, the approval of our elected representatives, just as Director Gunther did for the 2007 guidelines, and as Director Fabrice-Whitney did regarding Minute 319. Okay. I will now introduce our next speaker. Next up is Pam Adams. Pam is a hydrologist for the United States Bureau of Reclamation. Pam has been involved with outreach to the tribes concerning the DCP. She will provide a brief update on the progress. Pam?
Thank you, Clint. As you saw on the previous slide, tribes in Arizona used about 30% of Arizona's share of Colorado River water. And collectively, they are a really important piece of the water user profile. And because the United States government has an important legal and political relationship with Native American tribes and communities, Terry Fulp, who is the regional director for the Lower Colorado area, felt very strongly that he should individually meet with tribes in Arizona to talk about drought and drought response as the department and CAP were meeting with their stakeholders and their customers. In early February, he invited the tribes to meet with him, again, to talk about the current drought and to discuss future and current drought response activities. We've conducted initial meetings with 15 tribes. We have several more to go. And we're also having follow-up meetings as requested by the tribes. Reclamation is absolutely committed to working with tribes as the drought contingency planning evolves. As the drought contingency, oh, that's better. Thank you. Drought contingency planning evolves. We'll continue to meet, have discussions, and we'll help in any way we can. Thank you.
Readjust this. We will now begin taking questions from the audience. I will first take questions from folks here in the room, then we'll take questions from the satellite locations. If you have not already done so, please submit your blue card to the staff. If you're in need of a speaker's card, please wave your hand, and our staff will bring one over to you. Please note that due to the limited amount of time in coordination with other satellite viewing locations, priority will be given to questions being asked versus public comments. For any questions that we may be unable to answer due to time constraints, a representative, as I had mentioned before, will respond to you through email. So please be sure to provide your email address on those cards. When your name is called, we're just going to go with the blue cards, and then a staff member will read from them. Katasha, please. Oh, okay. Thank you.
I think I got it now. How will the new shortages be distributed in Arizona? Do we have some ratios as for the 2007 guidelines? What percentage is CAP versus on-river? And how is this to be determined?
Suppose I could have stayed there. Ted Cooke, CAP. As the question alludes to, under the 2007 guidelines, the working assumption is that one graph that we showed that when the 2007 shortages are implemented, it would be according to the CAP priority: excess water pool first, non-Indian ag second, ag pool second, non-Indian ag third, and so forth. So there is an open question about how these additional amounts from the DCP, the Drought Contingency Plan, would be done. Will they be done in the same way? Will they be done in some different way? Will there be participation from the on-river community, or will it be all CAP? We don't know. If we follow the law of the river, it will be these additional quantities, just like the 2007 guidelines, would be almost 100% CAP. But those questions are not settled, and that's part of the reason for, as Clint described, there needs to be a pretty intense intra-state discussion to answer those specific questions. So I'm sorry, all I did was restate the question and say we don't know yet, but it's not. I think the point is it's not necessarily under the traditional priorities within the state. If we collectively decide to do it in a different way or to do it in that same way, it's up to us.
Right. The cake isn't baked. We've been soliciting input, and we will continue to receive input and hope to develop some sort of synthesis, a consensus, and give elected bodies some time during the, basically an opportunity during the fall to respond to the proposals, and we can take that to the legislature.
Thank you. We have no questions from the UMA, and we have no questions from the CAP office, just so you guys know. This one was from the audience. Will the Sun Corridor growth propositions be possible without new water for new growth?
So will the Sun Corridor growth projections? Oh, okay. Well, basically, there are certain priorities that are going to be implicated, and we're still, proceeding the process, trying to understand the implications of the DCP on Arizona's economy and the rest. But sure, I wouldn't say that it's going to have growth impacts. We're still trying to understand just the implications and how it's all going to work out, and part of that is why we're talking to stakeholders around the state, and we're about halfway through a critical period here where we're receiving that kind of input.
Sorry. This is another question along those same lines. It's obviously on the minds of people. How do you accommodate population growth with these calculations?
Was had been related during that second slide. Arizona is consuming approximately the same quantity of water as had been utilized back in 1957. That's because our predecessors had responded successfully to the challenges that existed at the time. It's going to require some resourcefulness. It's going to require collaboration. It's kind of a Team Arizona circumstance, but we will again have the discussions to try to form consensus and move forward and better understand the implications.
Okay. How can we or...
Oh, Lisa, do you want to take a shot at that?
Okay.
More comments on that. I think, there we go. Just a couple more comments to add to that. I don't think any of what we're talking about here means a stop to anything. I think what all of these programs are focused on is the continuation of what we have done in Arizona with the lifestyle that we have created, even in an arid climate that we have been able to establish. And and these programs are to do two things: to continue along with that can be inclusive of the people who are already here and more people that will come. Not that we'll stop or watch what we've achieved begin to dissipate and decline over time. That's what this is all about. If we don't have all the answers of how that will happen today, but we need to keep doing what we're doing. Conservation at the local level is a very important thing. We're not going to conserve our way out of the structural deficit, but certainly continuing to improve on the consumption per person, GPCPD or whatever measure, is part of the equation. So keep doing what we're doing and find new innovative ways to do more will be the things that will allow us to preserve what we have and create more.
Another question. What are the plans for public involvement in the Drought Contingency Plan collaborative process?
Well, in November, we commenced the process by engaging water providers and other major stakeholders, and we have we brought that to the representatives of some of the largest communities in Arizona, some of the largest ag users, and received their input at that time. And again, that's a continuing and ongoing process, and at some point through the summer, we're going to have that opportunity that we'll have the effort to synthesize it and then take that to the elected representatives. We've been out traveling the state, presenting, Director Busashki and I were in Yuma a couple of weeks ago presenting to various folks down there. We've had numerous conversations here in Metro Phoenix, and and also about 3 weeks ago, several of us presented down in Tucson, and so it's just a matter of, it's a function of time and getting out and having that sort of engagement and receiving input from as many as possible.
So I'll elaborate just a little bit on that too. Multiple, not a lot, but multiple approaches here, and Clint mentioned most of them, and I'll try and put that together a little bit. So over the last few months, several months, coming out of the discussions among the states, back in Arizona, discussions with key water use sector leaders, the ag community, consultation with the tribes being led by Bureau of Reclamation, municipal user groups, agriculture, I may have mentioned that one already, on-river constituents, etc. We will have at least, I believe, we're planning to have one or more of these type of events here sometime during the summer. That's the second thing. The third thing then will be, and Clint mentioned this, that the Department of Water Resources plans to take what is learned from those earlier conversations with the water sector users and put together a framework of what might work for the state as a whole to move us toward consensus, and then bring that framework out for further discussion. It's very difficult to do with 300 people at a time, so we're going to have to find a way to have representative discussions. So obviously the dialogue between individual constituencies and their elected officials, their water providers, their user group representatives is going to be important so that those ideas can funnel up and the bandwidth for the conversation is not too wide. And then last but not least, among those three things, bring the ideas to the governing bodies and elected officials that will need to make decisions on implementing whatever it is that we come up with. And then the final step will be going to the legislature to give the director the authority to agree to, on behalf of the state of Arizona, what it is that we will do with the other basin states. But the director, and it showed up on our slides, the director has been very firm about the fact that he will not go to the legislature unless we have a cohesive coalition on what to do within Arizona. We're going to have that solved before we go and ask for legislative approval.
Yeah, I think Ted encapsulated it well. Basically, we've engaged the major stakeholders and given them an occasion to reach out to their constituencies, their elected officials, and we will continue to do that. And it's just part of a major effort to form consensus and then take that to the elected panels in the fall.
Thank you. What are we doing to address the structural deficit?
Well, we didn't point it out on the slide, and the goal of the DCP is not to solve the structural deficit. But if we, under this program, if we adopt the DCP program and we reach the point at which we are approaching level 1025 in Lake Mead, we will find ourselves at the point where we are collectively conserving over 1 million acre-feet every year at those levels in Lake Mead, which is right about where we need to be to offset the structural deficit. So it's not a forever program. It does unwind if the lake improves, but what that will have moved us closer to is learning how to conserve at those levels that we need to solve the structural deficit on a more permanent basis. And the lower basin principals, this is at the state level, have agreed, once again, when this is done, we need to move right into that next discussion of, okay, what do we need to do next? We've come this far, we've got a plan in place. The 2007 guidelines and the DCP that will overlay that will only go to the current termination of the 2007 guidelines, which is 2026. What happens after that? We want to find ourselves having another conversation about what will the Secretary do if we don't do something? Let's start that now. So this is a huge step toward solving the structural deficit. We'll learn a lot from it about what we need to do, but there will be more work at some later point.
We have several more questions, but we only have time to respond to one more. We will answer the rest through email. So if we could just have that last question.
Yes. Under the DCP, Arizona forgoes diversions of Colorado River water in favor of leaving water in the lake. Would Arizona have the right to divert that water at some future date if Lake Mead and Powell recover?
I can address that one. All of the details are not worked out yet, and clearly we don't even know. We know what the numbers are at this level. We'll do this much. We're not sure exactly who will do pieces of that and where it will come from. But as the programs that we've had up to this point, we expect there to be two basic categories. One of them will be what we call system water, which is there for the benefit of the system. But there also will be a ICS, or intentionally created surplus type mechanism similar to the one that we have, where for certain types of conservation, yes, it will be recoverable under certain conditions at a later point in time. So both of those categories that are being left in the lake today will continue under this new program. And those rules and guidelines will be part of the agreements of how that works, what elevations, what quantities you can withdraw, things like that.
Excuse me. I didn't get the name of my group here, so I want to ask something on behalf of tribes. I was looking to do some presentation that we usually get like 18 tribes of the size of the Colorado River, and we talk about pilot programs, but when we talk about permitting, there's only one tribe involved. And I think one of the definitions you gave was the settlement tribes. So it starts with 18 tribes the size of the Colorado River, and it goes to one tribe with permit ability to the drought system, and it goes to the CAP tribes or settlement tribes. Essentially, the CAP tribes. What about the main 10 tribes that became the solution that we're all trying to find here? How do they participate in that? Nicole, do you have a solution for that?
Well, conversations are being had with all parties, tribal and non-tribal, and any participation or any help that can be forthcoming coming from any party is going to be important. It's going to take all of us to do this. The single tribe that was listed as an example of what's being done was the Gila River Indian community, which is right smack here in the middle of the CEP service territory. But we did not mention them, but there are a number of other tribes that have participated under both the MOU and the Pilot System Conservation Program. Those similar types of programs will be discussed with on-river parties, tribal and non-tribal, to try and see how they can participate and help as well, because we're going to need that level of participation. The law of the river, of course, is very complex, and it's not one size fits all, that what works here might necessarily work there, but that's where our creativity needs to come to the forefront. I don't know, Pam, if you had any other comments on that.
I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge a couple of things. First of all, we have more than 250 people who are physically present at DWR, again, with our appreciation to our host, DWR. We also have more than 60 people who have joined this conversation this morning remotely, so we have a rather large attendance, and we are pleased to know that there are so many people who are interested in getting the latest information at our second annual meeting. I also would be remiss if I didn't identify our partners at the state and federal level as far as the delegation, the governor, and the legislature is concerned. Representing the congressional delegation is Carly Friday from Senator McCain's office, Buchanan Davis from Senator Flake's office, Kenny Pugh from Representative Gosar's office, Michelle Davidson from Congresswoman Sinema's office. We also have Christine Firethunder from the governor's office, from Governor Ducey's office, and from Speaker Gowan's office, Gina Cash is here. And I just want to make a personal comment. Water is a legacy issue in Arizona, and the fact that we are able to gather here today means that that legacy issue is possible because it represents partnerships and conversations that have gone on for decades and decades. It's one thing when you know you're the junior water user. It's another to use that information in the most positive way possible. And I think we have a history to follow, and you all being here today complements that history. We know we have to do this together. We can be proud of the incredible success that we have to date. It has been successful. You've heard reference made to things that Arizona has invented, the water bank, the other steps that we have taken as a junior user on the river to be prepared for that day that we all knew was going to come. And we did that by working together. But we have to keep our sleeves rolled up, and we have to build upon our work. We don't have any other choices, and we don't need to be distracted by the fact that we don't have any other choices. Every ounce of energy and thought-provoking ideas and partnerships has to be focused on the end result, and that is to deal with the tipping point that we have reached on the Colorado River. We have a lot of work ahead of us. The system has reached that tipping point that we knew would come one day. It signals the need for Colorado River water users, regardless of the state in the basins, the priority or the use sector, to work even more quickly and diligently to address the ongoing imbalances between supply and demand. We need to increase conservation to the benefit of the system itself and to take proactive measures to increase Colorado River water supplies. CAP and DWR are taking cooperative actions with others in both the upper and lower basins, and I think that is a point that we should not lose sight of, that it involves both the upper and lower basins to avoid shortages and support our reservoirs. But it's Arizona stakeholders, the people who are in this room and the people that you represent, who repeatedly set the standard for water conservation. We do what we must to protect Lake Mead. That's because we talk, we work together through conflicts. We don't manage water as an every man for himself proposition. We rise together. All of us have worked to build the shortage preparedness systems that we now have in place and that you were briefed on today. As our systems are tested and our plans are put into actions, our collaboration must continue, and we are committed to working with each and every one of you. We value the partner that we have with DWR. You all are part of the process, and we need to reach a workable consensus. The conversation will continue to evolve, and I and my colleagues on the CAP board look forward to seeing what we can collectively come up with, because I know the strength of our combined capabilities. Thank you again for your time and your participation today. This is our second annual meeting. Please don't hesitate to follow up with additional questions if you have them, or any comments. But most of all, your suggestions on how to protect Lake Mead are welcome and very valued. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. All the presentations shown here today will be posted on the respective AEWR and CAP websites later today. Thank you for attending today.